it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Chairman Lyle Larson. He chairs the House Natural Resources Committee, as all of us know, represents District 122 in Northern Bexar County. As you heard Representatives Lucio, Moore, and Harris all say, he has been dedicated and a leader on water issues for many sessions and knows more up at the State House about groundwater than anybody else. We are delighted to have you here, Chairman Larson. And with that, I'm just going to say welcome and turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, you had a very good panel before I came on, and they hit a lot of the points that I was going to talk about. The session is going to be different. If you look at how California, Colorado, and some of the other states have ran through the COVID experience, a lot of virtual stuff, not a lot of hands-on from the standpoint of people coming into the Capitol and meeting with people. Mainly, it's being done by meetings off-site, or you have the virtual meetings in your office, and the folks that are advocating for certain things are doing it outside the Capitol. There are screens inside the committee rooms, and there are screens inside on the House floor and the Senate floor, where people, senators and representatives that may have been exposed or that just don't want to be in that environment, they're able to actually participate virtually. So, you know, it's all, I think, dependent upon where we are as far as the virus is concerned. Historically, these viruses have got a lot more aggressive in the fall. Going back to 1918, that's where a majority of the Americans were killed, was because they think there's a correlation to the temperatures. I'm not a doctor, don't pretend to be one, but listen to the scientists, and I think a lot of it we're going to cue off that. Saying that, I think there's going to be less bills. I think that we need to temper ourselves, all of us individually, look at what the priorities are, and then, you know, the committees. If you look at, like, the state of Nebraska, they only guarantee a hearing for 2 bills per legislator. And if you take it from that perspective, then you know, you're not going to have a lot of bills filed. I think we do need to have sort of a confined session, and what comes through the committees, the onus is going to be on the chairman to try to ratchet down the number that are going to be on the floor, then limit our time that we're going to have actually on the floor. So it's going to be different. You know, the H&R, we'd be in West Texas, or we'd be in East Texas. We'd be going where the water controversy is, or where we need to address certain concerns, or the follow on the brackish bill or the ASR bill, or dealing with the regional conflict, and looking at what the committee's done, and bring a lot of that information forward. Unfortunately, we've been inhibited by the virus, and we haven't had any interim hearings. In fact, I know that y'all are participating in the interim charges. We floated those out following the protocols that the Speaker's office asked us to do, and we're asking people to weigh in and have written testimony about the five elements that we're asking for input. So I think that on the brackish side, there's still some work to be done there. We've asked the Water Development Board to look at the buffer zones. They put a contract out, and they're negotiating that right now to try if we can reduce the input from the injection wells that oil and gas is in. If we can reduce that buffer zone from 15 miles, somewhere between 1 mile and 15 miles, because 1 mile is what the Railroad Commission recognizes as a containment around one of the water zone is not impacted. So that issue, aquifer storage and recovery, we're going to continue to follow on. We've got somewhere in the range of 23 to 25 studies going on statewide. City of Austin is seriously wading into that issue. And so I would really like, and this is going to be a challenge, and from a groundwater standpoint, obviously not as much impact as we have at the surface level, but I think that we, with the ASR bill that passed, and for us to be able to access the flood or the flood flows that are flowing through our basins in our reservoirs, I would like to challenge the state to create a redundant water supply at the surface. If we can take, I think the study that came out from the city of Austin was they could put 3 Lake Austins, or they could have captured over the course of the last few years the volume of 3 Lake Austins and put it underground. I think that we need to look in every basin and figure out of if geology is conducive to it, to start storing a lot of that water underground. I am concerned about the drought that's coming up, and I think all of y'all that heard me talk about it, the urgency that we need to be addressing, the water shortage we've got, through the state water plan. We can't wait, and it's not going to get any better in the conditions where we have so much surface water. If we're going to create a situation where we can take take the pressure off of groundwater, it's going to be supplementing it with a lot of our surface water. So a lot of your folks in the association have worked with us very constructively. Concerns about about ASRs and what is the lack of control of the groundwater districts. I think the input that we've had with the groundwater districts and with TCEQ, the development of the rules, and as we move forward over the course of the last year, I think we're in a good position. But I definitely want to hear, and Alan Day and some of the other folks that have expressed concerns about how it's been implemented, all of that. We still want the feedback. We don't have all the answers. This is an evolving situation, so we definitely want to work with them. The the other issues dealing with DFCs, and I know there's people pushing for reform on that, and dealing with the next set of DFCs that are going to unfold here. I think that we need to look at some of the ideas that people had. Some people with your association have got some creative ideas on how we can address those issues. The other issues of ownership, they're going to continue to evolve through the state courts. We've got a lot of people that have contacted my office a lot. A few that pretty sizable landowners that are concerned about infringements of their state rights. So, those issues I think will never go away. But I look forward to working with everybody in your association and across the state about protecting a resource that's depleting quickly, and we got to get real creative and what we can do to bring more water to be available, whether it be reuse water, dealing with our surface water, all of that stuff. So I look forward to answering any questions if y'all have any.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And everyone remember that the questions feature on the webinar you can use to submit questions. We do have some that have come in and love for you to take an opportunity to answer those. So knowing that it's going to be a tight budget year, and also being someone who's been very dedicated to, we need the best science, we need to keep developing the science. What are your thoughts on any expanded funding for TWDB, or even just ensuring we can maintain the funding that they have gotten in the past to protect their ability to develop that science?
Yeah, I think that issue, we're $5 billion short, $4.5, $5 billion short, and there's going to be a lot of demands on all of the agencies to reduce their costs. I think that from the water development side, we're talking a few $1 million that have a huge impact on developing water resources in our state. And so I'm going to work with the appropriators. We were fortunate to get the funding reestablished for the brackish studies. We were able to get the funding and dealing with the aquifer storage and recovery along the basins. And I know that John has got some ideas about some of the things that they want to continue to do studies on. So I'll be very protective of it. It's going to be a challenge because, like I said, people are going to try to cut in. But I look at water as one of the most important aspects of what the legislature deals with. And we already run the Water Development Board, and Peter and the board do a great job of overseeing it. But they run on a pretty tight budget as it is. And if we start curtailing funding from any of the studies that are ongoing, people are going to suffer in the future if we do that. So I haven't heard of anything as far as the ongoing revenue or the ongoing studies being curtailed, but any of the new studies that want to be conducted, that might happen in 2023.
Wonderful, thank you. Another question that came in was about last session you had an omnibus groundwater bill 726, I believe. Are you anticipating you'll have a similar piece of legislation this upcoming session?
I think that some of the main initiatives that we had over the course of the last 8 years culminated into that bill and some other bills that we had been working on for a long time. So I really don't have any predisposed thoughts about that, but ultimately there's a lot of people that have some ideas on dealing with. Most of it has to deal with ownership issues. The rural water folks have got concerns about infringements on the areas that they serve, and then the tag, y'all are going to have some issues that are going to be brought up. TWCA has some reforms and some issues. So I think a lot of the bills that I've been pursuing over the course of the last few years, we initiated, not so much TWCA or TAG or some of the other players that are in the water world. So we're going to follow on with all the bills that we've got through the system. Fortunate to have the governor sign them and have full support in the Senate. We've got flood control bills that we need to follow up, work with Dave Phelan and work with Senator Perry on some of the things that they are working on. The funding, $793 million, about how that's going to be sorted out. But I think that the one thing that we really stress, and again, from a groundwater standpoint, is to take pressure off our groundwater districts, is when we have these flood episodes, that all of the money that we're putting into the flood mitigation, is there has to be a water resource component to that. In the past, we bifurcated flood control and water resources, and other states around the country have evolved their thinking on flooding, of seeing it as an opportunity as a water resource. We've done the opposite. The counties that normally dealt with it, cities and counties that dealt with flood control, and the state has sort of had a hands-off approach to it. We've got to look at it as an enrichment for our water resources. So now we're going to have to be much more aggressive in dealing with it. I think we cleared some hurdles about concerns about the scalping of some of the flood flows, and we're talking fractional scalping just because your ability short of a off-channel reservoir. Those are it's from my standpoint in 2021 probably gonna have limited opportunities. So if you have something for your association that you feel real strongly needs to be addressed, we probably need to prioritize them to one or two, because we're not going to get a lot of bills through the process. I just don't see that at this point. I don't see, based how other legislatures across the country are convening, and the limited time that you have for bills. So I would challenge you to work with TWCA and some of the other water advocacy groups, and let's pare it down to a few, and then be more than glad to assist y'all in that.
Well, thank you for that. And yeah, we definitely do engage with the TWCA Groundwater Committee. And actually, Sarah Kirkle was this morning providing our legislative update. And so she provided the full membership some information on that, which is great. Another question came in about your House Bill 807 that passed in that Interregional Planning Council. And just kind of the question had to do with, are you monitoring that, and how do you feel like that's going, and where do you see that maybe leading to in terms of a next step?
I participated in one of the hearings. Shannon Houston, she has been monitoring that, and she's given me feedback as far as the progress they've made. I think people were trying to figure out exactly what the end goal was, but they've broken into some subcommittees, and I think that they're making some substantial ground right now as far as dealing with the conflicts, how to deal with it, how we can create more of a statewide approach to water goals instead of the 16 planning districts, of how we cross those lines and create more of a unified state approach instead of 16 different approaches. And I think that Kevin Ward and some of the folks that have taken the leadership on that committee, along with members of your committee, I think we're getting to the point where we wanted to be, coming into October when the report was due. So yeah, I'm feeling encouraged by it. We just got to break down walls, and people, just start the discussions. At first, it was a little rough. There was some pushback, the territorial issues, and fully expected that. And now I think everybody's getting along and understanding that there are some things that we can do better, and it's just by cooperation.
Thank you for that. And I might pose for the last question, the question I posed, that an audience member posed, but that I spoke out to the last panel regarding, this sort of, so many issues and conversations about water tend to have more of an urban focus, meeting the demands in the urban areas, whereas the Texas economy is driven in large part, of course not completely, but the sectors with oil and gas and agriculture. And maybe speaking to how to get those rural communities better represented in water conversations. Do you have anything you'd like to share on that?
I think that that's just a natural evolution of population. Is you're going to always have the divide. And I heard what Cody said in talking about the rural versus the urban. Yeah, that's been since the beginning of time. The Roman Empire, they would develop water resources, and they create conveyance projects to move water into the area, so they had a supply line of water. It was the same for the Spaniards when they settled into Texas in the late early 1700s. They built these aqueducts around San Antonio, still operating, moving water from the semi-rural areas into the missions they were developing. And so I don't think you get away with away from it. I think you learn how to manage it. I've been a study of the Western states because they're sort of leading us a sort of a foreshadow of some of the things that we're going to have to deal with. It would be California, Arizona, Nevada. All of those states have populations that are surging. They've got limited water supplies, and they've got to reconcile the difference between the urban and the rural use. They've done a great job of developing water markets, and the water markets will create more conservation. The water is going to be used at the highest, most beneficial use. They're following ground, and allowing allowing folks to harvest water. They've created reverse the auctions on water. They're doing some creative things, but I think you've got to create balance, and every one of your members that runs a groundwater district understands that. You've got 65% of the water use in the state is ag, and we've got to continue to have food and fiber in close proximity to our population centers. So it's going to be imperative that your members provide that balance, and that I don't, the large conveyance projects, somewhere down the road, they're going to be basin to basin, and I know the interbasin transfer issue, a lot of people, they've created that as a sacred piece of legislation. It is counter to markets materializing, and it's to the detriment of the groundwater. If we're not moving our surface water like people are moving the groundwater, then I think somewhere we're going to have to reconcile that. Somewhere we've got to be smart about how we look at all of our water. Saying that, a lot of people have talked about the consistency in rules of groundwater and surface water, and you come from a state where they manage the water. There's not a difference. The water is controlled by the whole state, and so I don't see us controlling all the water. Controlling surface water will continue, but there's got to be some kind of the application of rules of uniformity on how we address those issues. So I think those are all issues that probably sooner than later, because of issues that we've looked at in dealing with the connectivity between surface and groundwater, and people not recognizing that when we went up in the Brady area, Menard area, and people pumping, when they start pumping groundwater, it has an influence on the San Saba, and that's across the state. Somewhere we're going to have to cross that bridge between ground and surface water. Some of your folks do a great job already in recognition of that, but I think we need to look at the full science package and start making decisions. So all of those are subsets of rural versus urban, and I think that's not much of an appetite for that, from the legislative standpoint, because it gets real complicated and it gets very controversial. But we've got litigation against other states using that same premise of connectivity, but we're not willing to address it ourselves. So it's sort of interesting, but we'll have to navigate it, or we'll just spend a ton of money in the courthouse trying to figure it out. But I think that y'all are sort of the wall between rural and versus urban, in the most part. Most of your groundwater districts, they're already dealing with the issue of urbanization of some of the areas they represent. And they've got to reconcile the law versus the demand, and for the most part, do a really good job.
Thank you for that. There's a couple of things you mentioned that, thinking about so many times, and whether it's creating markets and this press to have agricultural water maybe move to cities, I think a huge thing that needs to be overcome is the trust factor, and just getting people to feel comfortable enough working together that they can come up with the solutions. Like once they get past that, the rest tends to fall into place much more easily. So That's
Yeah,
always been my experience.
yeah, you're right. Yeah, I mean, the whole discussion on the water grid was pretty interesting, and where the debate and the lines that it fell. If you look at the water grid, the people that benefit the most are the rural areas. And when I say that is when you create conveyance and connectivity on water projects, and these are all 100 year. This is a 100-year plan where we're moving water. It sort of foretells, where the demand's going to be, where the water's going to come from, and it's all based on science. And so I think that it broke down. I think our vote was 93 to 46, something like that. And so it was urban versus rural. That vote was a test vote about, the urban areas, the urban areas from a legislative standpoint versus the rural areas. We're becoming an urban state. 20 years ago, we were still a rural controlled state. So with that, I think the dialogue that you're talking about, the urban areas should not grow to the detriment of the rural areas. There's got to be some kind of balancing act, and I absolutely agree with you that there should never be a threat. But I can tell you that it's going to be more difficult. There's very few people in the legislature that understand anything about the water issue. I mean, you had three folks that understood it because they live it. Andy, he's from a community that water is a viable part of it. Eddie's been on the Natural Resource Committee for a decade, and he understands the ins and outs, the nuances. He lives it down in the valley. And then Cody, he was served on the committee, has a lot of interest in it. But you go outside of our committee, and a lot of new members on the committee, they don't understand the vernacular, they don't understand the nuances of the water world. And so y'all done a good job, and the people with TWC have done a good job trying to go out and educate legislators. It's just not a big issue to, they turn on their tap and they go, well, yeah, there's water right there. They're just not, there's just not a level of interest from the standpoint of doing the work, understanding where the water supply is, where our challenges are, where the law is, all of those issues. So we definitely got to create that bench and get more people like Cody and Andy and Eddie, get them up to speed about what's happening, what our challenges are, because I still, and I say this ad nauseum, that the water is our biggest challenge as a state. Bar none. It's not transportation, it's not education, it's water. Wait till we get in a 3-year drought, and then everybody will understand that. But nobody understands it when we get the rainfall that we've had over the last few years. We're starting to get dry again in certain parts of the state pretty quick, and we start to see the aquifers fall, and we see our reservoir levels drop. So I'll still push that, and people think I'm crazy that I keep sounding an alarm. No, the alarm is not today, it's for 5 years from now. You got to ring it and have a response for 5 years.
Yep, nope, the time to plan is now, yesterday.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Thank you so much, Chairman Larson, for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you be a part of our summit. Thank you for doing it in this virtual setting. It's not nearly as nice as all gathering together down in San Antonio, but nevertheless, our audience really loves to hear from you, as do I, and it means so much. So,
well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Y'all be safe.